All right, functions. So here you have a couple of examples of function tables. In a function table, you are seeing whatever happens, if this is the value of x, you do something to get y. And sometimes they will tell you what the function rule is and how you get from x to y. But x, the one on the left, is known as the input. In this case, it would be a. This is the value you are putting in. And the second column is the output, or the result based on the function rule. So if it's vertical like this, the one on the left is the input, the one on the right is the output. If it's horizontal like this one, the one on the top is the input and the one on the bottom is the output. So for a simple one, how do we get from 3 to 1? And in a function table, the rule must apply to all the paired numbers. So I can't add 4 on one and then add 7 on another. It has to be the same rule every time. So how do I get from 3 to 1? I can subtract 2. And so if that works for this one, I have to try it on the other ones to make sure that that's the right thing. Is 5 minus 2 3? Yes. 6 minus 2 is 4. So it's x minus 2 is the function rule. So to solve it, I would just do 10 in place of x, 10 minus 2, which would be 8. And I've solved the function rule. For this one, same thing. I'm looking for the function rule, so how do I get from 3 to 8? Well, I can add 5. So if I add whatever x is plus 5, I get the output number. So I check that. 5 plus 5 does equal 10. 7 plus 5 does equal 12. So in this case, I would have to work backwards and say 15 minus 5 would equal 10. And then that works because 10 plus 5 equals 15. Down here it's a little bit more complicated because the output is whatever you have for x, you put it in this equation. So if they give us the value of 3, that means I put 3x plus 1, and I'm going to replace the x with the value here. So 3 times 3 plus 1 equals 10. So same thing here, 6 times 3 plus 1 equals 19. And so for the last one, I'm replacing, I'm trying to figure out what this is, so I did the one backwards here, so it threw me off. 3 times 8 plus 1, so 3 times 8 is 24 plus 1 is 25. And so I'm able to solve all of those, the input and the output. Now the next part is going to be a little bit more complicated, and I'm just going to show you how to find a function rule if it's not easy to see, oh, yep, to get from this to this, I can subtract 2. And if you look at the function rule here, I can add 5, but I can also multiply 2 to get from 5 to 10. So sometimes you have two different things that you can use. But notice, I can multiply this one by 2 to get 10, but if I multiplied 7 by 2, I wouldn't get 12. So if you're increasing, you know you're adding or multiplying. If you're decreasing in value, you know you're subtracting or dividing. But make sure that the rule that you're using works for the other problems. So if you are trying to find a function table, and a function rule, and again, this is more complicated, so if you understand what has happened so far, you can stop watching the video and just go ahead and work on these. But if you want to know how to find the function rule, it's change in y over change in x is the first part of it. So I take any two columns. So if I want to take this one right here, the 3 and the 1 and the 5 and the 3, the change in y is it went up by 2, and then the change in x is it went up by 2. So 2 divided by 2, which equals 1. I take this number and I multiply it by whatever one of the x values is. So just like we had the 3x plus 1 here, I would have 1 times x, and then I have to figure out what the next part is. So if I do 1 times x, I get 3. How do I get from 3 to 1? I subtract 2. So my function rule was 1x minus 2, which is exactly what I have here. And sometimes it'll be a little bit more complicated, but if we were trying to solve this one, which is probably a better example, so, but the numbers they give you aren't great to solve that. But if we did change in y, so we would do, these would work, I was looking at it the wrong way. Change in y is, between these two is 9. Change in x between those two is 3. So when I do 9 divided by 3, I get 3. So now I know I'm doing 3 times whatever x is, and then once I do that, I do 3 times 3, which is 9, and how do I get from 9 to 10? I add 1. And there's my function rule, which is the exact same one they have here. So if you ever are struggling to figure out what the rule is to get from the input to the output, this is how you would solve it. You won't probably need these on any of them, but that just is FYI on how to do that.